So I'll be on page 226 of Treasure's Trove of Scriptural Transmission, the commentary on the basic space of phenomenon by Longchenpa. And please take a moment to relax. I'm going to let the doggies in. Hello, Tank. Okay, pardon the interruptions. It's the doggy mandala. So the four methods of resting, and may this reading benefit all beings, and definitely benefit Dzogchenpa's practitioners out there. So, first it can be shown that you begin by resting imperturbably like an ocean, without the arising and subsiding of thoughts. There is naturally limpid, pristine state, like the unwavering evenness of a limpid ocean. Free of the occurrence of or involvement in thoughts, free of hope and fear, you abide within a state of naturally occurring timeless awareness, the true nature of which is profoundly lucid. So that was the root text there in bold commentaries here. Even as reflections of planets and stars appear in an ocean undisturbed by wind, they are not other than the water, yet are not affected by it. Similarly, even as perceptions of sense objects arise continuously within awareness, which, being unobstructed, is immaculate, they are not tainted by reification, and so you rest without straying from that limpid, pristine state of awareness. The Tantra without letters states, the pure enlightened intent of resting imperturbably like an ocean is not the ordinary perception of sensory appearances, nor does it cause them to manifest. It is not empty or something that exists as emptiness. It is not mere clarity, but is the realm of supreme lucidity. It is not mental laxity or an agitation. It is It is not mental laxity and agitation is automatically absent. It has never wavered, does not waver, and will never waver. It has never varied, does not vary, and is beyond all variation. Beyond the supreme method of resting, which is not brought about deliberately. Do not try to complicate or simplify it. Isn't that great? Do not try to complicate or simplify it. This unique state of resting imperturbably is not one of maintaining stillness, yet there is no going beyond it. So here also we see This is a contrast to Sutrayana Shamatha or Shinena in Tibetan, which is that calm abiding meditation. So it says this is nothing to do with maintaining that stillness. Rest in the timeless, spontaneous vastness of immutable basic space and secret, timeless awareness, which is like an ocean. In this great ocean, whose depths are hard to fathom, behold the pinnacle of the victory banner that never falls. In the ineffability of mind, which is empty, lies the supremely uncontrived kaya. And kaya is like body. We can consider that word in modern days like a container or a volume or a womb. It's like a body, and sometimes in these Dharma texts we can think of a body that has no boundaries. Not produced, it is victorious over all attempts to produce it. The uncontrived state of resting imperturbably has never come into being. It is not altered by sensory appearances or fabricated by ordinary consciousness. Okay, so here you see that there's nothing that our ordinary feelings, thoughts, etc., can do to create this. If one abides in space, the true nature of phenomenon, it reveals itself to be enlightened intent. And we hear this phrase a lot, enlightened intent. Just remember that that word intent actually encompasses sort of enlightened thoughts, enlightened perception, so to speak, enlightened feelings, so to speak, kindness, all that. Okay? It's just all subsumed within that word intent. And then also in this particular Richard Barron translation, they use the word ordinary mind for our conditioned mind. That's all that thinking and constructed sort of mind. But in other texts, select few, you'll see the word ordinary mind means your natural enlightened mind. And I really like that translation of it, but it's good to be able to see where sometimes it gets used in both contexts. That way we don't get confused. Timeless awareness, Dharmakaya, is the total renunciation of ordinary thinking. So if nothing causes one's mind to stir, there is the enlightened intent of meditation. If one does not indulge in extremes, with sense objects as a frame of reference, then, like planets and stars being reflected as though in the ocean's depths, lucidity is continuous without being reified. Such is the way in which enlightened intent is present. In this regard, some deluded people who are not learned in the Tantras, but just speak off the tops of their heads, take as a final statement the incomplete treatment given in some texts, and so think these four ways of resting imperturbably are methods of resting used only. And see, this is something that I need to know here. Quite to me, also applied to Trekcha. And I was totally right about that, you know. You can apply the four stages that we have here. You can find a good translation of the four visions, and they're pretty much synonymous. And actually, I think my first teacher, and still my teacher in heart, Pema Rinpoche, he put Togyal with all these postures and the gazing and working with light rays. He put that after Kororushin and before Trekcho. So now you'll see Tokyo come after Trekcho and also be sort of held to be more supreme or something like that. But Tokyo, if you just let appearances be, that's Tokyo. Let them begin to self-liberate. If you just let your entire mind be and let confusion self-liberate, that's Trekcho. And so, really, if you start with Trekcho, you don't have to. Tokyo is included in that. Once you realize that reality is the dynamic energy of your mind, and it's a sort of display of your mind, like in a dream, it's displaying this whole world, right? So, in that way, you start to not just let your own thoughts and emotions be, but the whole environment. So, all four foundations of mindfulness come back here into play and into play because that's sort of what it ends up being. The appearances are sort of the play of the mind, um, and cognition, co-emerging like that. But it's important to understand, any of you that are getting into Dzogchen and maybe a little bit more into the specifics, uh, if you rest the basis of your mind, if you rest your very mind, Trekcho, um, then of course appearances have to follow with that because your mind is the very source of appearances. You see? But we have an advantage here. Here, we have texts that actually tell us appearances, let those be too. So some people may separate those and think of Tokyo as an external thing to do and light phenomenon to be external to you and all this stuff. That to me seems problematic, but it's prevalent nonetheless. I would say in this approach, yes, great to take Tokyo retreats and get teachings on Tokyo. Uh, I mean, I don't know what else there is to do except to be introduced to those postures and how to start dealing with bindus and Vajra chains and things like that. But really, if you're resting in awareness, it's like Longchenpa said, mind resolves itself in phenomenon, and phenomenon resolves itself in mind. So there should there should be really no hard duality there between Trekcho and Togya. And for some reason out there, you may find that a little bit. So just giving my perspective, okay? Just my opinion on that. So it says here, this is an indication that they have not developed their connection with these teachings. So it's saying if you feel like that these four ways of resting only apply to Tokyo, it's an indication that you have not developed their connection with these teachings and do not understand how to apply them in practice. While one application is outlined in the preceding citation from the Blossoming Lotus section of the Tantra Without Letters, in general, these four methods can be applied in a number of ways, as outlined in the precious detailed instructions concerning perception, where it is said that they are applied in all situations. Whether your approach is that of Trekcho or Togyao, fundamentally, you should understand how to elicit unobstructed awareness in all its nakedness. So I'm just going to read that sentence again. Whether your approach is that of Trekcho or Togyao, fun- fundamentally, you should understand how to elicit unobstructed awareness in all its nakedness. So pretty much exactly what I just shared with you all, that uh, familiarizing with awareness and abiding in the nature of your mind is really the first and foremost. Okay, that should actually take precedent, in my opinion. To combine that with your yoga, combine that with your dancing, combine that with your pranayama, combine that with your sky gazing. Um, Whatever it is, when you bring Dzogchen into it ends up becoming a little bit more real in a sense. If you do not understand this, these ways of resting will be of no benefit, however you apply them. If you adulterate the Trekto approach with the spiritual path of every deluded meditative adept, you will squander your life on what are very minor means of focusing the ordinary mind, and so will not transcend samsara. And if in Tokyo you fixate on things as real and invest them with characteristics, you will err and take rebirth in the form realm. So see, this is exactly the pitfall of Tokyo. You can fixate on all these little bindus and Vajra chains and things and be really fascinated, and it can be a slight sort of thing in your mind for a whole decade. You think there's these external light phenomenon going on, and uh yeah, you're not just fixating on them as real, you're also reifying dualities and reifying your sense of a conditioned self and causing all kinds of other knots in your experience. So at this point, it is very important to recognize bare consciousness in all its nakedness. Here we have bare consciousness, synonymous with timeless awareness. So anybody who's out there wondering, is consciousness the same as awareness? Well, right there, Longchenpa and the translators here have uh, told you the same that you would hear in the sutras, actually, in the canon. It's also talking about that. That's why there's confusion, because in the five aggregates, they're referring to a conditioned consciousness. Yeah, the five aggregates, conditioned five aggregates, uh, they must be held in something. And what the five aggregates, they have a basis, which is unconditioned mind. Your awareness nature holds the five aggregates. So that includes conditioned consciousness. And there's actually a lot of confusion out there in the world of Buddhism, because this when you talk about, oh, you still have a Buddha consciousness, and they'll say, no, consciousness is one of the five aggregates, and they're not self, they're empty, and da da da. I've seen this debate many times. Yeah, Dustin.
I was actually just thinking about this the other day, just reflecting on like I don't know, I don't even know how I came to think about it. But anyway, I felt like from at least in my experience, consciousness is sort of like the like particular sensations that like you might feel like if, for example, like you put your hand on like a cold object, like that feeling I think is kind of like what I think that's what they mean by consciousness, but that is different from
You mean
awareness
in the
because
aggregates?
yeah, I'm assuming that's what they mean.
Well, they
Like
also
one of
mean the they mean the seventh condition consciousness, your thoughts, your emotions, and all the senses. Yeah, the senses. You're right. The senses would be included in that, but it's also much more expansive than that. Conditioned consciousness is essentially the whole conditioned thing. The whole thing.
right, as opposed to
It's like coffee being
awareness.
mixed into pure water. It's like you know, pure consciousness is still here, but we're mixing in this sort of dream into it.
So from at least from like if I put it pithily, I maybe understand like consciousness being about like particular sensations, whether they be emotional or like literally sense-based versus awareness, which is more like just this open, like
Like a field.
it's yeah, exactly. It's not really
But
like
it's
it
still
doesn't
like
have any.
it's still
Oh,
alive though, right? So we can sort of call it living intelligence. And in physics they talk about this white noise and all these like particles just jumping from this field, ready to be vibrated a certain way to come and become fundamental particles, like electrons and anti-electrons just bouncing off of this field and going back into it, a field of nothing, like from nothing everything's coming. And so I don't know if they're talking about the same thing in physics as we're talking about in Dzogchen, but it dang sure sounds like it, you know? And the idea is that we can actually rest in that field, and then whatever's coming in and out of it will self-harmonize. Because we're the
Okay.
vibrators. Well, that doesn't sound good. But we're vibrating things. Okay. Don't ruin the recording.
Okay.
But you know, our mind is the initial sort of yeah, we vibrate this field. From my guess, if I was to correlate it to physics and to just add a little bit more to Dzogchen, that I feel like Dzogchen's saying anyway, you know, there's this, because there is this Dharmakaya field of infinite potential. It's the womb of infinite potential, the feminine. And so we can sort of stimulate that, and next thing you know, a co-emergence happens as we're stimulating it. Whatever we're stimulating, if maybe we have a desire, well, that's what's co-emerging with our lucid mind. You know, as soon as we have that act, that thought, you need to stop. So it's important to understand, it's almost like looking into a mirror, where the reflection comes at the same time. Well, just like in your dream world, as soon as you have that cognition, the display of the cognition is co-emerging.
Mm.
And so it does, reality does sort of uh, end up being like an energetic display of your mind, you know, but in a volume, not in a projection. So let's get, you want to get through a little bit more of this, or any other, you guys good? All right, let's see what else Longchenpa is saying. So really talking about how Tokyo, if you fixate on things as real and as separate from yourself and all this, it could be problematic. Uh, where did I leave off at? Hold on. Okay, yeah, I got it. So at this point, it is very important to recognize bare consciousness in all its nakedness. But it's not simply enough to understand this. You must maintain an ongoing state of authentic being. To that end, it is very important not to stray from that state. And so numerous methods for resting are spoken of as skillful means. So remember, we've been talking about that a little bit, that we have lots of ways to familiarize with awareness if we're still sort of in that stage two, or even during stage three. It can be great to hear these things. Initially, you must establish your natural place of rest to be the enlightened intent of resting imperturbably, like an ocean. So it is crucial to become proficient in doing so. This involves developmental process of cutting through potential errors. And I would not use the word developmental myself. I would say it's a process of familiarization. Yeah. And that's what, you know, sometimes those words sort of contradict the idea of letting go and effortlessness. So remember that. So the reverberation of sound states, a meditation that consists of biding without going astray, the avenues of the senses are lucid, though concepts do not stir in the mind. A mind that investigates consciousness as self is truly ineffable and is not lost to externals. It is neither clarity that fragments one's experience, nor preoccupation with emptiness, nor the sustaining of bliss, nor impartiality that becomes apathy. Contrived relaxation and the clarity of mindful awareness, a path that leads to incorrect training, fixation on the arousal of inner bliss, reification of clearly evident attributes, manipulation of visualized colors and syllables. If one does not succumb to such limitations, meditation consists of abiding without going astray. So this talks about all the tantras and Togya practices, sort of just continue to familiarize with naked awareness and don't rely on any of that stuff as an antidote. Here, the phrase reification of clearly evident attributes refers to engaging in thoughts of this or that concerning the manifest quality of external sensory appearances. The phrase manipulation of visualized colors and syllables refers to the reification involved in conceptualizing and analyzing the inner experience of mind at rest. So I've told many of you practitioners when I was asked for advice, and especially in Togyao, this is exactly what uh, I advised, and I'm happy that Longchenpa and I agree. And I also use for myself, of course, when you just let your mind rest in awareness, your vision, so-called vision, may change. Of course, that's just your mind. It's not your eyes. It's your mind making that reality. So all of that is going to change when things like timelessness uh, become more evident, and lucidity and intuition and sort of this dimension outside of thoughts. When these things become more evident, then yeah, there's self resolution, okay, just by resting. So the rest of the citation is easy to understand. As for resting imperturbably in awareness, without the compulsions of ordinary mind, there's an unfeigned state, a natural settling, uncontrived and unadulterated, though it cannot be characterized with words. This absorption is the expanse of being, the true nature of which cannot be characterized, involves neither meditation nor something to meditate on, and so laxity and agitation dissipate naturally, and enlightened intent occurs naturally. So this is great. It talks about again self-liberation. I think you're all starting to really understand that. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I really like that it says enlightened intent occurs naturally. That means you know, and the laxity, all these five hindrances will self-resolve, that dissipate naturally, and that comes down to trust. The more you trust the teachings, the lamas, the sangha, then this indeed will unfold that way. But the more you become hard-headed, then not so much. So, as for resting imperturbably, it's considered all appearances are the radiance of your mind. So, in Toga consists of rest, but right in actual awareness, naked and obstructed, while abiding within the limpid ocean of awareness. You identify its wakeful, pristine quality in all its nakedness and assure that you do not stray from it. And so it arises as the true nature of phenomenon, without any discontinuity or division into outer and inner. And see, I think Longchenpa is trying to point out that Togya can cause you to create an outer and inner dichotomy or uh, trichotomy and reify these three spheres of conception. And so Longchenpa's reminding here that just resting in awareness is good enough, truly. The fifth instruction for resting imperturbably in awareness, this is the point at which one touches on the secret. The enlightened intent of the single decisive point concerning sensory appearances is to seek a means of resting in awareness itself. Wow, I think we're starting to get it now, right? This is the supreme secret of secrets. So, those of you who are paying attention to specifics of Dzogchen, Trekcho supersedes Dogya. I think it's pretty explicitly stated here. Not that it matters, but I think there's a lot of excitement about Tokyo, and it's kept very secret and hush hush and has this stigma around it. Yeah, we can demystify that. So, this is the supreme secret of secrets. On the strength of one's perceptions of sensory appearances, one is liberated to the far shore. One is not bound by attachment, for these are awareness's own manifestations. This is referred to as elucidating the unobstructed, unique sphere of being in all its nakedness. The same Tantra states the unique sphere of being is without elaboration, it transcends verbal expression and analysis by ordinary consciousness. Okay, we can stop at 2:30. We're still on the first way of resting. So it's a good little teaching here. Thank you all so much, everybody on YouTube and here in the Sangha Mandala. I appreciate you so much. Your practice in these sort of turbulent times means the world to me, and I'm sure to all those around you and your personal mandalas. Any comments, questions, sharing, anything? All right. Uh, so the first one's like we're resting like an ocean. That means that you know when we look at a great ocean, it just sort of has this, and then everything's reflecting. You can see reflections in the surface of that water, but the water's just even. So these are great. I'm glad we stumbled upon these, and I think it's really wonderful. It'll complement our silent sits. We'll take a little break from the guided meditations because I think people are really starting to understand effortless abiding thanks to the guided meditations. Uh, and people who put themselves out there like that, uh, maybe we don't always see why that benefits people, but it certainly does. You know, like I said, people get to hear what our experiences are with this Dzogchen practice, and everybody has a unique presentation of that. And it's great how you can see Dzogchen in that. You know, it's almost like how you can see life in everything. You can see Dzogchen in everything.